The evening sun cast long shadows through the tall windows of the Blue Pearl restaurant as one of their most experienced waiters adjusted his navy blue tie in the staff room mirror. He'd been working at this upscale establishment for 8 years now, and every shift still felt like an opportunity to make someone's day a little better. The dining room buzzed with the gentle hum of early dinner preparations. Crystal glasses clinked as the bar staff restocked, and the smell of freshly baked bread wafted from the kitchen. White tablecloths gleamed under the warm lighting of elegant chandeliers, each table set perfectly with polished silverware and fresh flowers. As he walked through the restaurant doing his pre-shift checks, he noticed little details that others might miss. A slightly crooked fork here, a water spot on a wine glass there. He'd learned long ago that it was these small things that made the difference between good service and exceptional service. His colleagues often joked that he could spot a wrinkled napkin from across the room. The restaurant had become his second home over the years. He knew every creak in the hardwood floors, every corner where the evening light hit just right, and most importantly, he knew his regular customers, their preferred tables, their favorite wines, and their usual orders. Some had even started requesting his section specifically, having grown accustomed to his attentive yet unobtrusive style of service. Tonight was shaping up to be typically busy for a Friday. The reservation book was full, with several celebrations planned, 2 anniversary dinners, and a birthday party. He reviewed the special requests noted for each table. A surprise dessert for the birthday guest, a quiet corner table for an elderly couple, and a business group that would need extra attention with their wine selection. As he helped the other servers prepare for the evening rush, he shared little tips he'd learned over the years. How to carry 3 plates safely, the best way to open champagne without making a sound, and most importantly, how to read customers' body language to anticipate their needs before they even had to ask. The kitchen staff was preparing for service, with the head chef calling out instructions as delicious aromas filled the air. He stopped by to review the evening specials, asking questions about the ingredients and preparation methods. He believed that understanding each dish helped him describe them better to guests, making their dining experience more enjoyable. Just before the doors opened, he took a moment to straighten his name tag and double-check his order pad and pens. The familiar pre-service jitters tingled in his stomach, not from nervousness, but from excitement. Every night brought new faces, new stories, and new opportunities to provide memorable experiences to guests who chose to spend their evening at the Blue Pearl. The host began seating the first guests of the evening, and he took a deep breath, ready to begin what seemed like just another ordinary shift. Little did he know that this particular evening would unfold in ways he never could have anticipated, all because of one simple act of kindness that would challenge everything about how things were done at the Blue Pearl restaurant. The evening was in full swing at the Blue Pearl restaurant, with the dining room filled with the cheerful sounds of clinking glasses and happy conversation. The experienced waiter moved smoothly between tables, making sure every guest felt special and well cared for. The kitchen was bustling with activity, and the aroma of sizzling steaks and fresh herbs filled the air. As he finished taking an order from a young couple celebrating their engagement, he noticed an elderly woman being seated at table 15. She was elegantly dressed in a powder blue dress, her silver hair neatly styled, but there was something about the way she held herself that caught his attention. She seemed a bit uncertain, maybe even nervous, as she settled into her chair. Walking over to greet her, he noticed how she squinted at the menu in the restaurant's intimate lighting. The Blue Pearl was known for its romantic atmosphere, with dimmed crystal chandeliers creating a sophisticated ambience. But tonight, that same carefully crafted lighting was making it difficult for this guest to read her menu. The woman looked up at him with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I seem to have forgotten my reading glasses at home." Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to hold the menu closer to her face. There was embarrassment in her voice, the kind that comes from not wanting to be a bother. Without hesitation, he smiled warmly and said, "Please, don't worry about it. Let me help make this easier for you." He remembered the small reading light he kept in his locker, a gift from his grandfather who had faced similar challenges. Even though using personal items during service wasn't strictly allowed, he knew in his heart that rules sometimes needed to bend when it came to helping others. "Would you mind if I stepped away for just a moment?" he asked politely. The woman nodded, and he quickly made his way to the staff area. Opening his locker, he found the small LED reading light tucked away in his jacket pocket. It was a simple thing, really, but he knew it could make all the difference in someone's dining experience. Returning to the table, he carefully positioned the light to illuminate the menu. The woman's face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Oh, thank you so much," she said, her voice warm with appreciation. "You know, it's not just about reading the menu, it's about maintaining dignity. You've given me both." As he stood there, helping her navigate through the evening specials, describing each dish with care and patience, he couldn't help but feel proud of his decision. This was why he loved his job. These small moments where he could make someone's evening just a little bit better, a little more comfortable. Other diners nearby noticed this interaction, with several smiling approvingly at his thoughtfulness. One regular customer even caught his eye and gave him a subtle nod of appreciation. These were the moments that made the long hours and busy nights worthwhile, the simple acts of kindness that connected people. What he didn't notice, however, was his manager watching the scene unfold from across the room. Her expression was unreadable as she observed him using personal equipment, something that went against the restaurant's strict policies. The peaceful evening was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would challenge everything about how things were done at the Blue Pearl. The waiter continued helping the elderly woman, completely unaware that this simple act of kindness was about to spark a chain of events that would change not just his evening, but the entire culture of the restaurant. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest gestures, and this night was about to prove exactly that. The restaurant manager's heels clicked sharply against the hardwood floor as she strode purposefully toward table 15. Her face was set in a stern expression that seemed out of place in the warm, inviting atmosphere of the dining room. The waiter had just finished explaining the chef's special soup of the day to the elderly woman when he felt a firm tap on his shoulder. "A word, please. Now." The manager's voice was cold and professional, but there was an edge to it that made several nearby diners look up from their meals. She gestured toward a corner of the restaurant, away from the curious eyes of the customers. The waiter smiled reassuringly at the elderly woman and promised to return shortly, though something in his stomach tightened with worry. As they reached the corner, the manager didn't waste any time. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice barely contained to a harsh whisper. "Using personal items during service? That's strictly against policy." She gestured toward the reading light still sitting on table 15. The waiter started to explain, but she cut him off with a sharp wave of her hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. Rules are rules. They exist for a reason." Her voice was rising slightly now, drawing more attention from nearby tables. The gentle clink of cutlery had quieted as diners tried to discreetly observe the unfolding scene. This is the kind of behavior that opens us up to liability issues. What if that light malfunctioned? What if it damaged the table? The waiter tried to keep his voice steady as he responded. "I was just trying to help a customer who couldn't read the menu. It seemed like the right thing to do." But the manager wasn't interested in explanations about kindness or customer service. Her face had turned a shade redder, and her clipboard was clutched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Turn in your apron," she said flatly. "You're terminated, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Several gasps could be heard from nearby tables, including one from a regular customer who had been coming to the restaurant for years. The elderly woman at table 15 had her hand pressed to her mouth in shock. The waiter stood there, momentarily stunned. 8 years of dedicated service, countless happy customers, and numerous commendations, all ending because he tried to help someone read a menu. He began to untie his apron, his fingers slightly trembling, but his head held high. He knew in his heart he'd done the right thing, even if it had cost him his job. The restaurant had grown uncomfortably quiet. The usual cheerful buzz of conversation had been replaced by whispers and the occasional sound of chairs scraping as people turned to watch. In the kitchen doorway, other staff members stood frozen, watching their colleague and friend being dismissed so publicly. The elderly woman slowly rose from her seat, her voice shaking but clear. "This is how you treat someone who showed basic human kindness." Other diners began to murmur in agreement. A couple at a nearby table put down their forks, looking disgusted, not at the waiter, but at the manager's handling of the situation. As the waiter folded his apron, a younger customer pulled out their phone, fingers flying across the screen. The manager, still standing rigidly, seemed oblivious to the ripple effect her actions were causing throughout the dining room. She was following policy to the letter, but in doing so, she was about to learn a harsh lesson of the power of public opinion in the age of social media. What started as a simple act of kindness was about to become something much bigger, as dozens of witnesses to this injustice reached for their phones. The next 5 minutes would prove that sometimes the most powerful changes come from the most unexpected moments, and that in the age of instant communication, justice can move at the speed of a tweet. The dining room of the Blue Pearl restaurant had transformed from a peaceful evening setting into a scene of quiet outrage. The elderly woman stood firmly at her table, her hands gripping her chair for support, but her voice grew stronger with each word. "I've been dining in fine restaurants for over 50 years, she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, "and I've never seen such a heartless response to an act of kindness." Other diners began pushing back their chairs and standing up. A businessman in an expensive suit who had been quietly enjoying his steak spoke up next. "I've been coming here twice a week for the past 3 years, he said, his deep voice carrying across the room. "That waiter has always provided exceptional service. This is absolutely unacceptable." The manager's confident demeanor began to crack as she realized the situation was spiraling beyond her control. Phones were out everywhere now, recording the scene. A young couple who had been celebrating their anniversary quickly typed away on their devices, sharing the story on social media. "You should see how many people are already responding to this," the young woman said to those around her. "It's going viral." At a corner table, a teacher who had brought her family for a special dinner night stood up. "Is this the lesson we want to teach? That following rules blindly is more important than helping others." Her teenage daughter was already showing her the growing number of comments appearing on the restaurant's social media pages. The kitchen staff had abandoned their posts to gather at the kitchen door, watching as their colleague faced this injustice. The head chef, known for his fiery temper in the kitchen, but his fairness with staff, emerged wiping his hands on his apron. "This isn't right," he said firmly. "We're in the hospitality business. Since when did we start punishing people for being hospitable?" Regular customers began sharing stories of how the waiter had helped them over the years, remembering their favorite dishes, accommodating special requests, making celebrations extra special. A retired couple recalled how he had once helped them surprise their grandchild with a special birthday dessert arrangement. Each story added to the growing chorus of support. The elderly woman who had been the catalyst for all this drama slowly made her way over to the waiter. "You remind me of my late husband," she said softly, but in the tense quiet of the room, everyone heard her words. "He always said that rules are important, but kindness is essential. He would have stood up for you, just as you stood up for me." Meanwhile, social media was exploding with activity. The hashtag #JusticeForTheWaiter was trending locally, and people were sharing their own experiences of workplace injustice. The restaurant's review pages were flooded with comments from people who had witnessed the scene and others who were hearing about it through shared posts. A group of business executives who had been having a private dinner in the side room emerged to see what the commotion was about. One of them, upon hearing the story, immediately pulled out his phone. "This is the kind of story that the local news would be very interested in," he said. A dedicated employee fired for helping an elderly customer. That's not just bad policy, it's bad business. The waiter stood quietly through all of this, touched by the support but maintaining his professional dignity. He hadn't wanted to cause a scene or create problems for the restaurant. He had simply wanted to help someone in need, just as he had done countless times before during his years of service. As the chorus of protest grew louder and the number of social media shares multiplied, nobody in the room realized that they were just moments away from an unexpected intervention. Sometimes it takes a village, or in this case, a restaurant full of witnesses, to right a wrong, and the next few minutes would prove just how quickly justice can work in the modern age. The power of social media was about to show itself in full force. The young couple who had first shared the video were amazed as their phones kept buzzing with notifications. "This is incredible," the young woman whispered to her partner. "The video has already been shared over 1,000 times in just 3 minutes." Local food bloggers who followed the restaurant's social media accounts quickly picked up the story. One popular food critic, who had previously given the Blue Pearl a glowing review, immediately shared the video with his 200,000 followers. "This is not the same restaurant I reviewed last month," he wrote. "Kindness should be rewarded, not punished." Comments poured in from all directions. Former employees shared their own stories about the strict policies at the restaurant. Regular customers posted photos of their previous visits, many featuring the kind waiter who had made their special occasions memorable. The restaurant's phone began ringing nonstop, with local news stations requesting comments about the incident. The manager's face had lost its stern expression, replaced by growing concern as she glanced at her own phone. The corporate office number flashed on her screen for the third time, but she seemed frozen, unable to answer. The reality of how quickly the situation had escalated was finally sinking in. Meanwhile, the elderly woman had become something of an impromptu spokesperson. "Look at all these comments," a teenager showed her, holding up his phone. "People are calling you the restaurant reading light lady, and you're becoming a symbol for standing up against unfair treatment." The woman adjusted her glasses, touched by how her simple need for help had sparked such a movement. The video was being shared with powerful captions. "Watch how this dedicated waiter gets fired for helping an elderly customer read the menu." Another version read, "8 years of service ended because of a simple act of kindness. Is this what customer service has become?" Local community groups began sharing the story, connecting it to broader issues about how we treat both elderly customers and service industry workers. A disability rights advocate watching the video immediately shared it with her network, pointing out how this incident highlighted the need for better accessibility in restaurants. The business executives who had witnessed the scene were now fully involved. One of them, who turned out to be a member of the city's Chamber of Commerce, was on his phone speaking quietly but firmly. "Your restaurant is about to become the face of everything that's wrong with rigid corporate policies," he explained to someone on the other end of the line. "You need to fix this, and fix it fast." In the kitchen, the staff had started their own form of protest. The head chef announced that no new orders would be cooked until this situation was resolved fairly. "We're a family here," he declared, crossing his arms. "And we stand up for our family members." The waiter, still standing quietly near the corner where he had been fired, watched in amazement as his simple act of kindness had transformed into a viral movement for change. Regular customers were now offering him jobs at their own businesses, praising his character and commitment to customer service. A notification sound echoed through the now quiet restaurant. Someone's phone had just received an email. It was about to become clear that sometimes the fastest path to justice runs through the court of public opinion, and in this case, that path had taken exactly 5 minutes to reach its destination. Corporate headquarters was about to make a decision that would not only change one waiter's life, but would set a new standard for how restaurants handle similar situations in the future. The power of human kindness, amplified by social media and supported by a community's sense of justice, was about to prove itself stronger than any rigid policy. The tension in the Blue Pearl restaurant reached its peak as the corporate office sprang into action. The security cameras had caught every moment of the incident, and the corporate team was reviewing the footage in real time. The restaurant's regional director, sitting in his home office miles away, watched the scene unfold on his laptop with growing concern. "Get me connected to that restaurant immediately," he told his assistant over the phone. Years of experience had taught him that some situations needed personal attention, and this was definitely one of them. As he watched the elderly woman being helped with the reading light, he saw not a policy violation, but a moment of genuine human connection. Back at the restaurant, the silence was broken by the sharp ring of the manager's phone. Her hands trembled as she answered it, stepping away from the crowd of onlookers. The other end of the line wasn't bringing good news for her. The regional director's voice was calm but firm as he addressed the situation. "Pull up the restaurant's social media right now," he instructed her. "Look at what's happening." The manager's face paled as she scrolled through hundreds of new comments, shares, and reactions. Local news stations were already picking up the story, and community leaders were beginning to weigh in. The corporate legal team had also joined the emergency video call, but their usual cautious approach was overshadowed by the marketing department's urgent warnings. "This could define our brand for years to come," the marketing director explained. "And right now, we're on the wrong side of the story." Inside the restaurant, the elderly woman had become the center of attention as she shared stories about her own experiences with kindness and its importance in the service industry. "When I was young," she told the gathered crowd, "businesses understood that rules were meant to guide us, not chain us. They knew the difference between policy and common sense." The head chef emerged from the kitchen again, this time with a cup of tea for the elderly woman. "This is how we treat people here," he said pointedly, looking directly at the manager. "Or at least it's how we used to." The gesture wasn't lost on anyone in the room, and several people nodded in approval. The buzz of phones continued as more people discovered and shared the story. Local business groups were now posting about it, discussing how companies should balance policies with human judgment. A nearby restaurant even posted an open job offer for kind-hearted waiters who put customers first. The regional director had seen enough. After a quick conference with other corporate leaders, he made a decision that would change more than just one waiter's evening. He stood up from his desk, straightened his tie, and prepared to make a video call that would be displayed on the restaurant's large screen normally used for private party presentations. Everyone in the restaurant watched as the screen came to life. The regional director's face appeared, his expression serious but kind. The manager quickly gathered the staff and customers' attention, though she looked like she wished she could disappear into the background. "Good evening, everyone at the Blue Pearl," the director began, his voice filling the dining room. "I've been watching this situation unfold, and I need to address something important." He paused, making eye contact with as many people as the camera would allow. "What I've seen tonight has shown me that we need to seriously reconsider how we define excellent customer service." The waiter stood quietly, still holding his folded apron, as the corporate office prepared to deliver a response that would demonstrate how sometimes the biggest companies can learn the most important lessons from the smallest acts of kindness. The next few moments would prove that even the most rigid systems can bend when faced with the undeniable power of human compassion. The regional director's face on the screen showed genuine concern as he continued addressing the restaurant. "First and foremost," he said, his voice clear and steady, "I want to personally apologize to our waiter who has served us faithfully for 8 years. The room fell completely silent as everyone listened intently. What I saw tonight wasn't a violation of policy. It was a perfect example of what true customer service should be." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Sometimes rules exist to protect us, but they should never prevent us from showing basic human kindness. That's not what our restaurant stands for." The elderly woman nodded in approval, her hands clasped together as she watched the scene unfold. Around her, other customers had their phones raised, still recording every moment of this unprecedented situation. The young couple who had first shared the video were live streaming the director's response. "I am not only offering you your job back," the director continued, addressing the waiter directly, "but I'm promoting you to head waiter, effective immediately." A burst of applause broke out in the dining room. The kitchen staff cheered from their position near the kitchen door, and several regular customers wiped tears from their eyes. Furthermore, the director added, "We're implementing an immediate change in our policy regarding customer assistance. From this moment forward, all our restaurants will be equipped with reading lights and other aids to help our customers enjoy their dining experience comfortably." The elderly woman's face lit up with joy at this announcement. The manager, who had been standing stiffly in the corner, was now being addressed by the director. "As for management," he said firmly but kindly, "we'll be conducting a complete review of our training procedures. Sometimes the best leaders are those who know when to be flexible with the rules." The waiter, still holding his folded apron, stepped forward. "Sir," he said, his voice steady, "I appreciate your offer. But may I make a suggestion?" The director nodded encouragingly. "Could we use this moment to create a program that helps all our staff better understand and serve customers with different needs?" The director's face broke into a warm smile. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need," he responded. "I want you to lead this initiative. Your experience and compassion will be invaluable in training others." As the waiter unfolded his apron and put it back on, the elderly woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "You've done more than help me read a menu," she said softly. "You've helped change things for every person who might need a little extra assistance." The other diners began sharing their own stories of times when they needed help but were too embarrassed to ask. A gentleman mentioned his difficulty reading small print after eye surgery, while a young woman talked about her grandmother's similar struggles at restaurants. The head chef emerged from the kitchen carrying a special dessert he had prepared to celebrate the moment. "This one's on the house," he announced, placing it in front of the elderly woman. "We're not just serving food here, we're serving people." Social media exploded with positive reactions to the corporate response. The hashtag changed from hashtag #JusticeForTheWaiter to hashtag #KindnessWins as people shared the video of the director's announcement. Local news stations quickly updated their stories, praising the restaurant chain's swift and compassionate response. The regional director ended the call with one final statement that would be quoted in articles and social media posts for weeks to come. "Today, we were reminded that the heart of hospitality isn't found in a policy manual. It's found in moments of simple human kindness. And that's a lesson worth more than any rulebook." The morning after the incident at the Blue Pearl restaurant, changes were already in motion. The corporate office had called an emergency meeting with all regional managers, and the conference room buzzed with energy as they discussed the previous night's events. The manager who had fired the waiter sat quietly in the back of the room, listening as the regional director shared his vision for a new approach to customer service. "Last night taught us something valuable," he explained, standing at the front of the room. "Our policies should empower our staff to help people, not hold them back from doing what's right." Training materials were being rewritten on the spot. The waiter's simple act with the reading light had sparked a complete overhaul of the restaurant's approach to customer care. "We're not just changing rules," the director explained. "We're changing our entire culture." Back at the restaurant, the morning staff arrived to find new additions to their service stations. Reading lights, large print menus, and even a few magnifying glasses had been delivered overnight. The elderly woman's story had opened their eyes to needs they hadn't considered before. The local newspaper had picked up the story, running a front-page article titled "A Little Light Makes a Big Difference: How One Waiter Changed Restaurant Policy." The piece featured interviews with customers who had witnessed the previous night's events, each sharing their perspective on how a small act of kindness had created such significant change. The waiter arrived for his shift to find a surprise waiting. The elderly woman had returned, this time with several friends from her community center. "We wanted to be your first customers under the new policy," she explained with a warm smile. "And we brought a few people who appreciate good service and kind hearts." The restaurant's training room had been transformed overnight. Charts about sales targets and efficiency were now accompanied by new posters emphasizing empathy and customer care. "Sometimes the best service comes from the heart, not the handbook," read one of the new training materials. Other restaurants in the area began taking notice. Competing establishments started reviewing their own policies, realizing that rigid rules might be costing them more than just customers. They might be missing opportunities to make real connections with people. The manager spent the morning in a sensitivity training session, learning alongside other management staff about the importance of understanding customer needs. "Rules are guidelines," the trainer explained, "not prison walls. Good judgment and kindness should always have a place in decision-making." Social media continued to buzz with positive comments about the restaurant's swift response. Food critics were praising not just the food anymore, but the establishment's commitment to genuine hospitality. "This is what happens when a business remembers that it's serving humans, not statistics," wrote one prominent reviewer. The kitchen staff had embraced the changes wholeheartedly. The head chef worked with his team to create special menu descriptions that were clearer and easier to read. "If we can make our food more accessible without compromising quality, why wouldn't we?" he asked during the morning briefing. Regular customers stopped by throughout the day, not just to eat, but to express their support for the changes. Many shared their own stories about times they needed extra help but were too embarrassed to ask. The restaurant was becoming more than just a place to eat. It was becoming a symbol of positive change in the service industry. As the waiter prepared for his first official day as head waiter, he couldn't help but smile at how a small reading light had illuminated something much bigger than a menu. It had shown that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness can light the way toward meaningful change. 6 months had passed since the reading light incident at the Blue Pearl restaurant, and the changes that began that night had grown into something remarkable. The once strict establishment had transformed into a model of compassionate customer service, and its story had inspired restaurants across the country. The head waiter, now leading the restaurant's new customer service excellence program, stood before a group of new employees during their orientation. "Let me tell you a story about a reading light," he began, watching their eager faces. "It's a story that changed not just my life, but the way we think about helping others." The elderly woman had become a regular guest, hosting weekly dinners with her friends. They called themselves the Light Brigade, a playful reference to the incident that had started it all. Each week, they noticed something new: large print menus, better lighting, staff who took time to explain dishes thoroughly without a hint of impatience. The Restaurant Industry magazine had featured the Blue Pearl in their latest issue. "From Policy to People: How One Restaurant Revolutionized Customer Service," read the headline. The article detailed how a potential PR disaster had transformed into a movement for change in the service industry. The manager who had once fired the waiter for helping a customer had undergone her own transformation. After completing extensive training, she now led workshops for other managers about balancing rules with compassion. "I learned that the strongest leadership comes from understanding people, not just following procedures," she often said. The corporate office had turned the incident into a case study for all their locations. New employee training now included a section called The Reading Light Moment, teaching staff to recognize opportunities to help customers in meaningful ways. The story was shared not as a cautionary tale, but as an inspiration. Regular customers noticed that the restaurant felt different. The atmosphere was warmer, more welcoming. Staff members seemed more relaxed and genuine in their interactions. "It's like being served by friends who really care," one customer remarked in a recent review. The head chef had embraced the spirit of change, creating a new menu that included detailed descriptions and allergen information in clear, easy-to-read text. "Good food should be accessible to everyone," he would say, proud of how his kitchen had adapted to better serve their diverse customers. Local disability advocacy groups began recommending the Blue Pearl as an example of inclusive dining. Other restaurants sent their staff to observe and learn how small changes could make a big difference in customer experience. The simple act of kindness had sparked a movement toward more thoughtful service industry practices. The young couple who had first shared the video on social media celebrated their anniversary at the restaurant. They were seated at their usual table, but this time they noticed something new. A small placard that read, "Every guest has a story. Every story matters." As the head waiter finished his shift that evening, he paused to help an elderly gentleman with his coat. The man smiled and said, "I read about what happened here. It's nice to know there are still places where kindness comes first." The restaurant had not just recovered from the incident, it had flourished. Reservations were up, reviews were glowing, and staff turnover had dropped significantly. People came not just for the food, but for the experience of being somewhere that truly cared about its customers. The reading light that had started it all now sat in a small display case near the entrance with a simple message. Sometimes the smallest light can show us the way to bigger changes. It served as a reminder that in the service industry, and perhaps in life itself, the most important rules are the ones that help us help others.